On your screen is the Kazakh #2 player WGM Alua Nurman. She's rated 2443 and is #2 player from Kazakhstan after Bibisara Asaubayeva, who's playing at the FIDE candidates. And for Nurman, this is a big round because she's facing Magnus Carlsen on the top board, and there Magnus arrives at the Grenke Freestyle Open. And you can see Magnus always walks very quickly because otherwise a lot of people stop him, and he has those earphones plugged in so that he can be in his zone before the game begins. As he enters in to the second round of the day, Magnus will be looking forward to an interesting struggle. And well, he has to do his customary interview there as Alua Nurman waits there. She has her phone on the side. Generally, she looks into it. And I think she has something on her mind with her phone, because generally phones are not allowed in chess tournaments. You don't keep it near you. You either submit it somewhere or don't bring it to the board. Magnus arrives with a glass of water there, handshake, and you can see Alua wants to ask something to Magnus and says, "Excuse me, can we take a selfie?" Magnus obliges, and a very nice selfie. You can find it on her Instagram page that she posted later after the game. And then she puts it in her bag, and Magnus looks there and he's like, okay, that's not where this is supposed to be. The phone should not be with a player. And Alua Nurman is very happy. The arbiter picks up a ball for the freestyle chess position with Fiona being there, and shows the position number, and the players start to place the position on the board. Every single game you have a new position from the 960 positions that are available. There you can see on the big screen, and then the game begins from that position that we have. So we'll look at the position when the game begins. As of now, both players have 90 minutes plus 30 seconds increment there, and adjusting the pieces there, Magnus. And he gets up from the board, and well, maybe he's looking for the arbiter, perhaps. There you see he calls in the arbiter and asks that the opponent has the mobile phone in the bag and that she cannot keep it there. Now, I think it's a good gesture by Magnus, because in general you cannot have phones with you, and if that was maybe found out during the game, that could have led to the forfeit of the point. But now she can collect the phone from the arbiter later on. Okay, the game is about to begin. The players are ready. Alua Nurman has the white pieces, and a handshake, and off we go. Let's have a look at the position. There's a rook, knight, queen, knight, bishop, king, rook, and a bishop. So the knight and rook are in the same position as in normal standard chess. Rest of the pieces are scrambled up. But one can imagine a move like g3 and bishop coming out and castles happening here. So fianchetto is very much possible. Alua takes more than like 5 to 6 minutes for her first move and plays pawn to c4. She opens with a nice move. One of her knights can go to c3, and then she could go e4, and the other knight could go to e3. That seems very logical. Magnus, on the other hand, takes a minute and plays pawn to g6, opening up the bishop on the long diagonal. And Alua goes g3, also opening up her bishop here. You can also play a move like d3 and bishop c3 to trade off these powerful bishops against each other. I feel like this position is not as sharp as many other chess 960 positions would be, and that it would kind of convert into a normal position pretty soon. That's my feeling. But let's see. d6 by Magnus, and now d3, a good move, trying to get the bishop out here to trade it. And I think Magnus could also play bishop c6, but on the other hand, Magnus has to be careful that he doesn't simplify the position a bit too much. He plays bishop c6, and Alua now could play e4 to close down, but I think just... Ooh, she plays e4. Wow, I can't believe it. Like, in a way, I do get it that she didn't want to trade bishops, but e4 makes her bishop slightly worse, weakens the d4 square. Magnus quickly goes back and tries to come from the other side. Bishop c3 played. By the way, if you give a check, I can just go bishop g2, and if you take, I can take with my king, and my king is safe here. So that's the thought behind that. Magnus plays pawn to c5. And now bishop takes bishop. And rook takes. So now you can't castle short, which is a small problem, but queen h6 check. The queen enters in. How dangerous is it going to be to have the queen there? Magnus goes king g8 and does not seem very bothered by this. Knight comes out to c3. The game is getting sharper and interesting. You would want to jump with the knight to d5 to go to e7. And the knight goes to c6. And the other knight can go to e3. Goes knight to d5. And the knight is looking at the e7 square. Magnus brings his knight to e6. He's looking at the d4 square. I think overall black is the one who somehow come out of this entire opening slightly better. Why would I say that? Is because while the d4 square cannot be controlled by a white bishop, the d5 square can be, and in fact by a pawn as well. So queen f8 played. Magnus is even ready to go into an endgame. I think she can keep the queens on the board. And she does exactly that. She keeps the queens on the board because I think one thing that's working out for white is the coordination of the pieces. Knight d4 now. Careful because the knight is very strong. It's looking at so many good squares. And Alua castles here. The rook and the king have changed spaces, and Magnus is like, I have my rook where I want it to be, so I'm going to play h5, h4, stopping the pawn in its tracks. And now bishop goes to h3, attacking the rook. A logical idea is bishop g2 now to trade off the bishops. She plays it. And now Magnus goes pawn to e6, a very, very interesting decision because, of course, you can't take the bishop. Knight f3 check and you lose the queen. Now he takes it. And king takes g2. And right now the position looking very even. a6, maybe with the plan to play b5 eventually. I think knight c2 makes a lot of sense. So does f4, being a little bit aggressive. You know, you've heard so much about Magnus. In fact, I'm pretty sure Nurman must have grown up watching the games of Magnus Carlsen and his endgame grinds. Now suddenly you're sitting opposite him. He's trying to grind out an endgame. b3 played. And maybe the decision here slightly dubious because now Magnus can think of playing b4, a5, a4. He pushes the pawn to b4, attacking the knight. The knight comes to a4. And now a5. He goes rook f2. The plan is to double the rooks on the f file. The queen comes in to g7. And now the rook comes to f1. The plan is to maybe break with f5 and rook d8. Both players playing calmly, playing slowly. King h1, waiting here. Maybe there's a move like e5 on the cards, because take the c5 pawn would be hanging. Goes king h7. And rook to h2. Whoa. Is Alua trying for g4 break and then h5? The knight jumps to e7. Wonder where Magnus is going with that knight. Queen g2. And he goes knight g8. He's going for knight to f6 or h6 to look at the g4 square. But before he can do that, Nurman breaks hg and h5. Boom. Oh, this is getting intense. Very intense, actually. And f5 played by Magnus. This requires precise calculation, because this could lead to a huge attack. Knight takes g4. What a move. Because if hg, fg, hg, king g4, king g6, queen g4, king f7, takes, rook g1, and you lose the rook. Wow, that was some intense calculation. Knight e7 and now h6 played. Maybe there were other moves to move the knight, but Magnus calculating this so well. Now that the h file is closed, I think Magnus is very happy. Queen f8, the knight comes back to e3, and somehow the attack, which looked promising, has sort of fizzled out. Queen to f6. And queen g3 played. He goes knight to c6. And Alua quickly goes rook g1. Magnus brings his rook to g8. He's playing this beautifully, Magnus here. Even these little moves. I like how Magnus is giving respect to the opponent, but at the same time furthering his own plans. And now rook d f8 seems very logical. Exactly, rook d f8 with the idea to take on e4 and then take on f4. Rook f1 played. And we have g5, pawn push, f takes on g5. And queen takes g5, taken, takes, rook takes, pawn takes pawn, and I believe you can simply take back. He takes back with the knight, takes, and he plays rook takes f5. Rook takes. And right now, if you think about it, the material is kind of even, but the quality of the piece is just so different. Rook is more active, white king is cut off here, the knight is more active on d4, and Nurman is trying her best to hold through in this position whichever way she can. But Magnus just magnificent. He goes rook g6. He's simply going to pick up the pawn on h6. He'll be pawn up then. And now king takes h6. For Alua, where does the counterplay come from? Knight f2. The pawn on f5 kind of dominates the knight for now. Rook e6. She trades the rooks. Magnus knows that knight endgames are like pawn endgames. Your pawn up should be good enough for a win. King g2. And now king to g5. Goes knight to d4. And you will slowly try to get your pieces in, maybe knight e2, knight c1, and try to get rid of that pawn. Alua resigns here. Magnus plays a very nice positional game, I must say. And I also have to give it up for Alua because she did try her best to attack in spite of, Magnus being so alert and so ready. And also this initial moments in the game where she took a selfie and then the phone and the arbiter coming and picking up the phone, and all of that was quite amusing. And let's see how Magnus sets up the position, because generally he tries to set it up in the way that the position was in freestyle chess, while Alua has just set it up like a normal position, and Magnus places the pieces in the freestyle position that was there. The players sign the score sheets, and I hope that you enjoyed this game from Grenke Chess Festival, and we will continue our coverage of this event along with the FIDE candidates. This is happening in Germany, Karlsruhe, and so hope you are enjoying both the events.
Thanks. Can we have a picture? Yes, sure. Can I get a picture? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I take a picture? Yes. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Well done. Thank you.